Wait a minute. These bench crafted dimensions are inches and fractions. But we're going to need to add fractions. How are we going to do that? Oh, I've got an idea. I know a guy in the Met Office in Exeter. He should be able to help. Bob? Jim Lynn? Yeah, not bad, mate. Listen, Bob, can I use your supercomputer? Yeah, what it is, I've got this diagram from the United States, and the dimensions are in inches and fractions. I'm going to need to add these fractions together. Really? Oh, okay. Oh, well, never mind. Yeah, well, thanks for trying, Bob. Yeah, I'll speak to you soon. Okay, bye. Not powerful enough. Hello, Jim Lynn here. Welcome back to the workshop. Of course, I've got rulers with imperial dimensions marked on them, so the bench crafted diagrams are not going to be a problem. In fact, a lot of the dimensions in there are going to be crucial to what we do next. More on that later, but first, have a look at this. Now, the reason I've done this is, first of all, to give myself a general overview of how all the parts are going to eventually fit together. But secondly, it's quite important that I take into account the orientation of the parts relative to each other. Because I'm going to be doing all my laying out and cutting on the reference surfaces, it's those surfaces that I need to ensure are in the correct orientation. Well, I was thinking about this and it struck me that it's going to be a lot easier for me to explain why I've set them out like this once I've actually cut the mortices and tenons. So for the moment, I'll just show you which surface faces which, and then I'll explain why later. Now, the reference sides of these two legs need to oppose each other, and the reference edges need to face in the same direction. Now, the reference ends of all three legs need to be at the bottom. Now, this short cross rail will end up going between the vertical surfaces on these legs, and its final position will be roughly somewhere about here, and its reference side needs to face in the same way as the reference edges on the legs, and its reference edge needs to face upwards. Now, in this long cross rail, the reference edge needs to be pointing upwards to match that of the short cross rail, because those surfaces are going to be coplanar. The reference side can be either way. On this third leg, the reference end is at the bottom, same as the other two legs. The reference side needs to face the tenon on the long cross rail, and the reference edge can be either way. Now, for this workbench, there's several important dimensions. There's the obvious ones like the height, the width, the length, but the most important or critical dimension dictates the position of these cross rails. Have a look at this. This diagram is part of the instructions for fitting the bench crafted glide M vise and crisscross, and Father John Abraham of Bench Crafted has kindly given permission to use these images. Now, the critical dimension is this one here. It's the hole for the glide main screw, and it's critical because I want to make sure that my short cross rail doesn't foul that hole, and that hole needs to be 22¼ inches up from the bottom of the leg. But I want the horizontal centre lines of my cross rails to be halfway between the top and bottom of the legs. So to check all this, I need to put that 22¼ inches into my design. Thankfully, as you can see here, the main screw is not only going to easily clear my cross rail, but my cross rail is going to be able to stay in the desired position halfway up the leg. Well, so far so good. Now we can start to think about mortise and tenon design. Now, first of all four mortices will go right through from one side to the other, and all the tenons will have shoulders all round. I've made this visual aid which shows the end of the tenon marked out in thick black pen, and this is on the end of the short cross rail, which is of course therefore the same size as the mortise that I want to cut. So how did I arrive at these dimensions? Well, this short cross rail is 72mm wide, and I like to design my tenons to fit in mortices which I can make with the chisel sizes I have. So this 38mm chisel fits nicely within the thickness of the rail. So I'll use that for the width of the mortise. Now for hogging out the waste, I'll use this 32mm chisel. Now you can see that that will leave a sliver of a couple of millimetres on the side walls of the mortise. So I can easily clean that up with this 51mm chisel. Now you can see that 72 minus 38 divided by 2 gives 17mm. So this becomes the shoulder dimension, and I'm having the same dimension of shoulder all the way around. Now there is something I need to check. I'm going to be finishing off the tenons with my router plane. So does that have enough depth of cut? Well, that's an easy check, isn't it? If I just put the router plane up against the side of the rail, you can see that yes, I've easily got enough depth of cut to do my 17mm shoulder. Now, if I use that dimension for all four shoulders, then this dimension here, from the top of the rail to the bottom, is 165mm. That means that the length of the mortise is 131mm. Right, so now that I've got all my mortise dimensions worked out, let's make one. So let's begin by doing some marking out. And I've used ruler stops, and this is the top of the mortise, and this is the bottom end of the mortise. And I'll make a couple of marks there. After having done that, I'm going to take some masking tape. I'm going to put a strip right in the middle, like that. Cut it off, and then put another strip right up tight against it, maybe not quite touching it, like that. Now the reason I do this is for visibility, that's all. It helps, you'll see in a minute once I've cut out the centre part of this, that it defines the outside edges of the mortise, and it's a lot easier to see than marking on this dark wood. Now with this one, I'm going to use my marking knife. I'll use the square, hold it tight. Now if I hold this down, I'm going to use the inside, the bevel of my marking knife towards the inside of the mortise. So all bevels go to the waste side. So I'm just going to make a cut like that, and then pressure this end here and make a cut there. Now I can get the square, reference edge here, reference off that, drop the knife into the existing knife mark that I've made, bring it up and cut across, maybe a couple of times just to deepen it. Now this time I'm going to turn it round. Now remembering that my bevel goes on the inside, so I'm putting the marking knife back into that slot, slide up the square and then draw across like that, maybe a couple of times to deepen it. Okay, so far so good. Now for the sides. I'm going to be marking out these mortices with this pair of Charlesworth style marking gauges. Now if you want to know how I made these, check out episode 25. Now on both of these marking gauges there's a letter W, and that simply tells me on which side of the pin the bevel lies, and that corresponds to the waste side of the mortise. So at the moment I just want to do a light pass just to cut the masking tape. So I'm holding the stock of the marking gauge tight against the reference edge, just touch into the masking tape and make one cut with that one, and then use the other one and do exactly the same thing. Now all I've done is cut the masking tape. So now I'm just going to remove the inner pieces of masking tape. Right, now you can see that I've got the outline of the mortise left. I'm going to make two more cuts now, and they're going to be separated by the width of this 32mm chisel. So this is the first one, and that's set to this edge, and the second one is set to the other edge. And this time I'm going to cut into the wood, starting right at this end. Make a light pass first of all, stopping at the masking tape, and then gradually deepen it, keeping the stock of the marking gauge tight against the reference edge. I'll do the same for the other side. And I'm preserving the outside edges of the mortise for the time being. But that gives me a working area that fits nicely into this 32mm chisels. So now I can go and sharpen the chisels and get cutting into that mortise. Okay, I've got my workpiece secure, I've got my chisel freshly sharpened, a decent sized mallet or club hammer as it's called, and I'm going to start right in the middle first of all. Then I can come to here. There's our first cut. Now I'm just going to work backwards. Right, I think I need to clean up the sides a little bit before I go any further. Just to give me a little bit of room. I can feel the sides of the 32mm chisel just beginning to bind in some of the rough stuff. There we go, that's better. Now we can get in. Right, let's keep going. Well, I know that by going down the sides vertically like this that the chisel's still cutting well. It's slightly less sharp than it was, although I think I will have to sharpen it before I get to the bottom. Right, I think I've gone as far as I can with that side. I'd be as well to flip it over and mark the other side in exactly this way and then start working in from the other side. Right, now I'm working from the other side, the face side, and I'm just going to start right in the middle again and try and poke through. There we are, that's us through. That's not too bad. It's not too bad. Let's get rid of some of this edge stuff. So that's effectively the first stage, which is to work your way through from one side to the other. Now that I've hogged out most of the waste, I need to start getting more accurate about these edges. So if you remember, I did put a slight knife line in this edge and another one in this edge, but nothing at all in these edges. So I've got to put in the lines on the sides and deepen the lines on the ends. So I'll just go back in with my marking gauge that's set to 64mm, and using the reference edge with the stock tight against it, I can just deepen these lines. Now I'm keeping the stock tight against the reference edge, but I'm moving the marking gauge with my whole body. This is so that I can keep my left hand from twisting the marking gauge. I'll just do the same with the 102mm. So I've got some nice deep lines in there that my chisel can drop into. Now for the ends, dropping the knife bevel side towards the waste. There's the knife in, square firmly held. Now we can start chipping away at these remaining edges to get some nice square side walls on the sides of the mortise and on the ends of the mortise. I'm just going to put the chisel about halfway between the existing rough edge and my knife line. Keep it as vertical as I can. Make a little indentation. You see it does squeeze the freshly marked edge tight, but that's okay. What we don't want is to damage that edge. Don't really want to go much lower than halfway down through the mortise, just in case I'm not quite vertical. I don't want to undercut the other side. That seems a bit okay. Now this looks like it's there's so little left that I can go straight in to this finished line. Get as vertical as I can. There we go. That went right down. These just pull right out. I'm going to be very careful to get this right in the right place. Now it won't be perfect at the moment, but what I don't want is to undercut too much. But this line here, down probably about 10mm, needs to be as vertical as possible. And the same on the opposite side, because that is where the tenon's going to touch. If I undercut slightly in the middle, it'll make the tenon slide in a lot easier and not bind. But the important thing is to get these edges nice and square. Right, let's tackle the ends now. So I'm using the full width 38mm chisel. Don't want to pull this way because I might crush my line. So just push the waste away from me. I'm trying to drop the chisel right into my knife line. And again, pushing the waste away rather than lever back against my nice clean edge. So I've got a nice clean edge there now. Undercut's okay, but not too much. Right, and if I leave that for the time being, that looks quite good to me. I might have to flip this back over and work more on these edges once I've checked the other side. The other side's the important side. So let's stop for the moment, flip this over and do the same on the other side. But for the meantime, you can see I've got nice sharp edges there, and I want to do my absolute best to try and protect those from now on. Okay, I'm pretty much done from this side, and looking at it, I think I've got it more or less square, at least halfway down. But before I can measure that, I need to get rid of this masking tape, and this is the reason why. My reference side is only square to the reference edge at these outer edges. If you remember, when I prepared the piece, I created a slight hollow in the middle. Now that I put the masking tape on, that's become a bump, and you can see that the straight edge is rotating on the masking tape. So I just need to take the masking tape off. So I'll do that now, and then I can show you how I'm going to measure this. Now when I put the straight edge across, you can see that it's rotating on the sides. And if I put my square down into the middle and move it left and right, you can see that gives me a great indication of where squareness is. I want it to be tight at the top and then see what happens down the bottom. As you can see, it's not binding anywhere because this side here is undercut. I can see that clearly. And the other side, that's actually pretty square, so I can leave that. So what I'm going to do now is flip it over and do the same to the other side. Right, okay, so I can see I've got a little bit of work to do there, so I'll just get this chisel. No more than the middle, just move down to the middle. Sharpened this chisel before I started this. That looks not too bad. This side, yeah, a little bit of lumps, a few lumps here, particularly down this end. Again, I'm not touching this top edge. Right, so just a few little bits of feather edges there, I can scrape them off with this knife. And I think we'll call that side done. Now there's one thing I need to do, I need to mark it up because I don't want to forget where my reference edge is. This is the reference edge, so I'm going to do any trimming on this mortise when I come to fitting the tenon on this side. So I'm just going to write trim here. That'll make sure I don't get that wrong. Now I can flip it over and check for full squareness. So the final thing I need to check is whether the edges at this side meet the edges at the other side all round. Now they should be pretty close because I measured everything off the reference surfaces and I was very careful. So I've put the square down in this side. I can see there's a slightly out there, but not much. It's pretty close all the way along. If anything, there's a slight bump at the bottom on that side, but on this side here it's the opposite, but it's pretty close. We're talking about a fraction of a millimetre. So I'm happy with that because I can trim as necessary when I come to fit the tenon. Now for the ends, how are they doing? A little bit out there, but not too much. Not too much for going right through. That's pretty good. So I'm calling that done for the time being. Yes, there might be some trimming to do to get the tenon to fit, but you always have to do that anyway. So we'll come to that when I do the tenon, but for the meantime, that's done. Well, I'm very pleased with this mortise. I have cut another mortise. It was done as a kind of a prototype. Not everything went according to plan with that one, so there's a couple of corrections to be made before I can use it. Apart from those two, there's another two still to be cut, so I'll get those done before I make the video about cutting the tenons. Now this video has been more of kind of bullet points about how to cut a mortise. So what I've done is I've stitched together all the clips to make a longer kind of ASMR type of video. So that's an opportunity if you want to relax with your favourite drink and just watch me cut a mortise from start to finish. But that's all I've got time for this week, so thank you very much for watching and I'll see you next time on Mr. Lynn's Workshop.